the complexities of the decision process of everybody. And I can have a mission, and another guy can have exactly the same mission, and he won't exactly fulfill the mission the same way as I do. So I think it's always an interesting thing to do things under the eye of other people, because you give them the opportunity actually to interrupt you and ask you what you are doing and why you are doing it this way. The second part, which is also very important, is game to fail. We always say that gaming is a good tool for trying to evaluate and do things in a safe-to-fail environment. As you know, nobody dies usually in war games. I said usually because sometimes you can try to grab the throat of the other players, but it's not really the case usually. So normally, nobody dies, which is very interesting because it allows you to fail. Many times I've been in the army looking at planning exercises where usually you start with an overwhelming force against the enemy. Not surprisingly, you win. And in the end, everybody goes out and goes home and thinks that he's done a great job and that we are ready. So being able to fail, first, is to understand the possibility that you might fail, okay? So, and you try stuff, you fail, and you learn. Because every time you do an exercise and you do planning exercises and you win, usually you don't learn much, but you learn a lot about yourself and the others when you fail. The third, is to play, to learn, to decide. I'm sorry well, it seems an evidence, but sometimes you have to think about it. Learning and deciding is just like every other process. You have to learn how to decide. Some people consider themselves as a natural-born leader, able to decide stuff without any prior knowledge of everything. I think it's usually very scarce and very rare. You have to learn how to decide. And gaming is a good way to learn how to decide and to interrogate and to ask yourself questions about the way you make your decisions, why you decide this way and why you don't. What you see here is a representation, and it's of the early Kriegspiel of the early 19th century from 1824. So this is the way, actually, at the time. So two centuries ago, wargaming was looking like. So what you see, blocks that are representing companies. The companies have the exact size of the company at the scale of the topographical map, and we consider the Kriegspiel of von Reiswitz of 1824 as the first Kriegspiel, as the first real war game, jeu de guerre, we say in French, because it was the first game that was built actually on datas. So it was datas about the efficiency of firearms and mostly about small arms fire that were computed and reunited in a book by Scharnhorst, which was a great reformer of the Prussian army. So the reason why the Kriegspiel was introduced inside the course of the Staff College in the Prussian army was because the Staff College considered it was a good idea to have a tool to learn, to teach the tactics, and not only to lecture the members of the army and the staff officers about the history and the great battles of the past, but to have a real proper tool to have people doing things and to be able to also to correct them when they made mistakes. Learn also, so play also to learn about yourself and to learn about the others. So it's a bit like I said earlier, usually when you play, you learn a lot of things about yourself and about the others. First, about yourself, the way you react to failure, the way you react to success. It's really important to have this in mind, okay? Some people, for instance, tend to be over-optimistic. So when they win, they usually go too far. Other people have sometimes some pessimistic approach. And it's also very interesting to see actually officers and staff officers playing games and see how they react to their successes and failures. So you learn about yourself and you learn also about the others, as I said earlier, because you see them practice, you see them do things, you see them think, and you see them also react. And so it's always very interesting because it's eye-opening, and you provide information for yourself and for the others. This is one of the main advantages of the game, which is basically a moment where everybody is producing knowledge for the others and also getting knowledge from the others. So it's mutually benefits. So it's a mutual benefit for playing war games. The other important thing about wargaming is to play to explore the future. Very recently, we had a game that was organized by the EHEDN, Youngs, and many students from lots of different universities in France, which was called La France en armes 2035. So it was basically a game about a possible future in Europe with an attack on the Baltic states and in Poland. And so we wanted to explore this future, to be able to identify issues, who's going to do what, with whom. It's always a good idea to use games, because when you are using games, you are able also to project yourself in the future, which is very interesting and important. Also, game is very good and very important because we are all ruled by social conventions, okay? So we're not supposed to be contesting the orders of our superiors. When you're a child, you're not supposed to be contesting the views of your parents and so on. But the game, when you play the game, everything disappears, actually, because what you do, as Jacob Huizinga, who is a famous philosopher from the Netherlands, he wrote a book, which is called Homo Ludens, so the gaming man. So what Jacob Huizinga says in this book, very importantly, he calls about the sacred circle of the game, which is basically something we all know intuitively, which is when we decide to play a game, the only rules that apply are the rules of the game, okay? So if you play in a family, you play, I don't know, Monopoly, whatever, the rules that are dictating all the conventions and all the social interactions around the table are the rule of the game. Everything else disappears. And it's really interesting to use this as a tool also, because when you do that, when you are, for instance, and in a meeting, in a planning meeting, usually the people who will have the last word would be the oldest in the highest grade and the highest rank. When you play a game, everything like that usually disappears, and so it makes for more frank discussions. Okay, because also you can pretend that it's not me, it's just the game. Okay, the game is just contesting your views, it's not me directly. So you have to address issues that are brought up by the game. The game is here to ask you questions, okay? And you cannot answer questions you don't ask yourself. So the game is good for that. The game is good for being able to level everybody and to have everybody talking on the same foot, on the same level. Also, gaming, this is the illustration of the game I mentioned earlier. So playing is also very important to have a little step aside. Producing a game or playing a game, but producing a game is very much like producing a master degree report, for instance, when you are in a master 1, master 2, and you're supposed to, in the end of your studies, produce a document about what you found. So it's exactly the same, actually. When you want to produce a game, you do exactly the same thing as you do when you are doing your researches. So you define your subject, you define its perimeter in terms of level, in terms of time, in terms of geographic limits, and so on. And so it allows you to see your subject in a different way, because you don't have just to comment. You don't just to have somebody says this, somebody says that, perhaps the truth is in the between. You have to try to modelize the reality, okay? So you have to be able to consider what is important, what is not important, what is secondary, what has an influence on what. And so when you come back to your subject, you see it in a very different view because you just, took a little step aside and watched it from another angle, and you can go to it in a very different way. Also, gaming is very important and very powerful for being able to go outside pure logic. Okay, one of my past superior, he was working at the CICDE, which is basically the center for training the army, and he was playing the forad, which is basically the people who play the red, so the bad guys that are here to give you problems when you are in evaluation. And what he said to me is the main thing. So the thing that is always the most surprising is stupidity. Because you are always thinking that the other guy is going to have logical and rational behavior. And when he does something utterly stupid, you are always taken totally aback by it. I'm not going to say to you that you can win a war by only taking stupid decisions. But for the first line of contact, and perhaps for the first few hours, well, just try to consider doing something really stupid. It might work, actually, but of course you have to think about your own stupidity, which is not really very easy to do. So basically, I'm playing a game. So I'm doing my planning is very good. My plan is cool, and I'm keeping rolling bad dice. Okay, and so I'm losing. It will create a situation that I was not considering at the beginning, and I have to think about it. So, games allows you to ask yourself questions you don't want to ask yourself, or you're not ready to ask yourself, or you don't even imagine, actually. So, for instance, games, in my view, are excellent for asking questions like, okay, in early 2022, lots of people were saying, okay, Putin is not going to invade Ukraine because it doesn't make any sense. Okay, but what if he does? This is the kind of question the war game is here to ask, actually. Not, okay, this actor is not going to do that. Okay, but what if he does? Okay, so games are good for being able to think out of the box and go back to the box afterwards to organize your thought. In the end, also, it's very important, playing to be beaten. Okay, and beaten really hard. Because when you are doing the plan, usually when you have an evaluation of your planning inside every army, basically what the evaluator is doing is just judging the grammar of the plan. So is the plan grammatically correct? But the real idea is my plan working? And the best way to be sure that your plan is working, or at least that is not that bad, is to have somebody in the same room or in the other room trying to put you to the ground and to humiliate you as fast as possible. Okay? No, but nothing can replace this. Nothing can replace the adversary, the opponent, the guy lurking in the darkness which is waiting and rejoicing at the idea to make you fail. So this is why gaming also is important, because if you are only playing, a blue cell, which is fighting, in fact, white cell, which is, in fact, referees, you're not going very far away. But if you have somebody else whose will is to destroy you and make you fail, it usually makes for better game and better preparation. I'm just finishing my presentation by presenting you the Wargaming Bureau of the Future Combat Command. So we have been created 2 years ago in August 2023, and our main objective, and the first one actually, is to form officers and non-com officers to war games. So it means forming them to do games, create games, design games, run games, because in my view, in our view, it is the most important thing. We are only at the beginning of something. We still need lots of acculturation inside the army. So many people have heard about wargame because it's a buzzword. Many people don't have a clear understanding of what it can do and it can't do. People think that you can imagine the future and you can predict the future with a wargame. You cannot do that. People think that you can produce data with wargamings. You cannot do that. You use data to create a game, but you're definitely not going to produce data with it. And so the idea was to form officers to make them understand what they can do, what they can expect from playing wargames, and what they can't expect from playing wargames. Also, so helping other people to create wargames. Because when we created this bureau, actually what happened is many officers and non-com officers literally came out of the closet. They said, okay, I'm doing wargames, I'm a fan of wargame, I've designed wargames, I'm playing wargames with my friends or with some of my military colleagues, but I was not too sure it was a good idea to mention it to my superior because they would think I'm a nerd or something, some kind of weirdo, so I don't want to talk about it. And now, thank you for mentioning it because I can do it. I remember, for instance, an officer, French officer from the gendarmerie who told me, in fact, all the tactics I know, I learned them by playing Warhammer. Okay, I was playing 40K when I was a kid, and all the basics of the tactics, I learned them by playing, Space Marines and stuff. What I learned when I was in Saint-Cyr was just a little bit more, and it was more military, but the essentials of tactics, I knew them by playing miniatures and on the tabletop. So we also try to support the game designers inside the institution. And we are also, of course, working at the joint level because we want to have discussions with the Air Force and the Navy to be able to produce games that allows us to explore our decision process and to be prepared for the war of the future. Thank you. Is there any questions, for instance, or? And if there's no question, oh, yeah, sir, yeah.
Lieutenant Colonel Sanulis, Lithuanian. I would like to ask you that anyway, you did wargaming some operation. If we want to wargame something, you making some matrices or something that you're making some decision points or something like that, that will be some battle and there will be decision point and we should react like that, or just to play, how to say?
That's a very good question. We use wargaming as a training tool, okay, to explore decision levels. But we also use it as a tool to prepare ourselves for basically future warfare. So we use real maps of real countries where we consider that the French army might be deployed, and to try to figure out how we can do things, with whom, and which condition. So all these things are also, of course, considered. So it's not just only educational. We are also doing it for trying to explore the future and think about how we can manage or use our army. We also use it actually, which is something I didn't mention, to explore new capabilities. So it's always a good idea to every army is designing itself, okay? So you have UAVs, you have lots of things, you have robots that are used, but it's always a very good idea to ask yourself how you are going to employ these new assets, even if they are not fully developed for the moment. I have a very simple and historic example of that, which is basically, you probably heard about the way the German Navy, during the Second World War, used what we know as the Wolfpack tactics. Okay, so it was lots of submarines that were lurking inside the Atlantic, and the idea of Wolfpacks actually was born during the First World War. But so doctrinally, the idea was born at this moment. But at the moment, the radio assets were not capable to allow for the creation of Wolfpacks because it was too difficult to be able to reach submarines in the middle of the Atlantic with the way the radio was developed at the time. So it did not prevent actually the German officers at the time to be able to think about it. Said, okay, one day we will be able to reach submarines in the middle of the Atlantic. So we have to prepare ourselves to the use of this radio and to the use of these tactics. So it's really important because usually this is something that is really discarded in development of new material and new technologies. The sooner you are trying to think about how you might be using this, the best equipment you will have in the end, because you will be able actually to tell the industrial that are developing it, okay, I am interested in this, I won't be interested in this part. So just stop developing this because it will be no use for me, but perhaps try to be more, to push more in this direction, because this is something that we might be, that might be useful for us. So I think Wargame is also very interesting in terms of development and of materials and new technologies. We're good. Thank you very much.